This video is going to go over how to create renderings as well as then how to place your sheets or your views onto sheets, kind of like the paper space version in Revit. First, we'll just do a camera or a rendering real quick. There's a few different ways to go about renderings. There's some extensions out there. We'll just do an in-house or like in the software rendering. And I always find that floor plans are the best view to kind of start these pictures or renderings from. So I'm in my level 1 floor plan, and there's two ways to get to the camera button. You can either click on this little arrow right next to your default 3D view, and there's the option to place a camera, or you can go into the View tab, and then if you click on underneath the 3D view, there's the option for the camera button. So two ways to get there. I'm just going to place like a camera, so I'm going to click on it, like over here. So this is where I'm essentially going to be standing to take my photo. And then after you click, it's going to ask where do you want to look. So I'm just going to kind of look through to my building. And then it's going to show me my building 3D. What you don't really want to do is orbit around in views like this. So I'm going to just kind of pull my crop regions around a little bit. I'll pull this up too, so that way my whole foundation isn't necessarily showing. Looks like something happened with this wall that took it off the roof, so I'm going to click on that wall attached up to base, click on that roof, and then I can create a render. So Twinmotion is one of the extensions available to do renderings. You do have to download it separately, and it is like a 19 to 20 gigabyte file. Also, the laptop I'm working on right now just doesn't run Twinmotion well, but it is totally free. I'm just going to do a plain render, so that's either in the View tab and then this little T-pop button, or it's keyboard shortcut RR. A couple of things to keep in mind when doing a rendering is the quality. The higher quality, obviously, the nicer it's going to look, but then also like the longer it's going to take. So if you don't have like a good graphics card on your computer, these could take a really long time. I'm just going to do a medium quality one, as well as your lighting scheme. Since we're outside, we definitely want to do an exterior one, and we don't have any artificial lights in this house, so we also don't want to do any artificial lighting along with it. And then background, depending on if I was to take this image and like bring it into Photoshop or some other software to kind of clean up or change a little bit, I would probably want to do like a transparent background. For this one, I'm just going to leave it as like, I'll put a cloudy sky in there. Sure, why not? And then I'm going to click on render. And while it's rendering, you can't do anything in the software. You kind of have to sit and wait for it to go. I know it says not responding. It'll eventually stop that. Since I don't have any site or ground at all, like my house is kind of just sitting here like floating, but it does help give me like a feel for my building and what things are going to be looking like in it. Now, when you're all done with your rendering, what you want to make sure you do is that you save your render to your project. So you want to make sure you save it or export it as just like a photo for you to work with. So I'm going to click Save to Project. I'll just call it Outside. And now I can close out of this. If you don't save it, you have to go through the whole rendering process all over again. Wasn't really that big of a deal for this project, but in some other projects it could be a pretty big deal. And it made a new little section here in my project browser called renderings. And I can go click on this image and open it up. Now, something to consider with your renderings is this should be kind of one of your final steps in your project. Because if I decide in my floor plan, let's say I just don't want this window here anymore. I click on this window, I delete it. The window's gone in my floor plan. It's also, if I go into my south elevation, that window's gone here too. If it was to have shown up in any sections, it would be gone in there as well. All of these views are linked to each other and therefore update with each other. But the rendering is a standalone picture, so it would stay in there in that rendering. So you always want to make sure that it's kind of like the last thing you do. Let me go back into my floor plan though and just Control Z, because I do in fact want that window there. Now, preparing our views for sheets, we always want to try to condense stuff as much as possible, or make like the smallest, make our view take up the least amount of space as possible without like cramming things. So one thing we're going to want to do for our floor plan is take like these elevation markers and bring them in towards our building. So that way they're not just kind of like hanging out floating here. So what I'm going to do is just click and drag to just get that whole marker. And then I'm going to click on that marker and drag it in towards my building. Now, something you want to keep in mind when you're moving elevation markers is if I click just once on this piece, I want to make sure this view plane is sitting outside our building. Sometimes when we drag it, this view plane gets brought in here. And essentially, this is going to make like a section cut. We want to make sure that it's sitting out there outside of it. So again, I'm going to drag around this north elevation marker, and I'm going to drag it in towards my building. I'm going to highlight this east one, drag it in towards my building. And I am trying to keep these like fairly lined up with each other, as well as these two symbols. Like that's kind of the reference I'm going for. And drag it in towards my building. So now my level 1 floor plan is set up for a sheet. I've got a scale of 1/4 inch equals a foot. Let's check out my foundation plan as well. So my foundation plan here is sitting at a scale of 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. So I'm just going to adjust that scale to 1/4 inch. And you'll see all of my symbols kind of updated to go along with it. Let's take a look at my east elevation, and I'll crop this view down a bit. So for my east elevation, I want to adjust my scale again. I want all of these to have that same scale of 1/4 inch equals a foot. And I'll click on just one of these level markers, and I'm going to drag, I didn't click on the right thing, I'm going to drag that in just so it's a little bit closer towards the building. It's really unnecessary for them to be so far away. And I'll go to my north, and I'll do the same thing. I've got to adjust my scale and adjust my level heads here. And there is, I might show, I accidentally clicked on that 2D option. I might show kind of another trick I'll often do of making it so that when I put them on the sheets, all of these are nice and lined up. I go to my south one, we're at 1/8 of an inch. Let's change it to 1/4. And my west one, I'm at 1/8 of an inch. Let's change it to 1/4. I'll go into my section 1 view. So this is already at 1/4 inch equals a foot. I've got my scale. The one thing we don't want showing up is this big crop box that came in automatically. So we're just going to click on hide crop region here. And I'll do the same thing on section 2. I'm already at 1/4 inch. I've already got my detail set. I'll hide that crop region. And so now my views are all prepped to go onto my sheets. To create a new sheet, you're going to do that in your project browser. You'll right click on sheets here, and then you'll say, I would like to make a new sheet, please. Now by default, the largest sheet of paper is loaded in, which is this 3 foot by 4 foot sheet. So we're going to load in a new title block first. So let's close out of this, and we're going to load in a family, which is LF, or go into the insert tab and then load Autodesk family. And we're going to scroll all the way down to title blocks, and we're going to load in a size D sheet horizontal. And then once we have that loaded in, we can then use that sheet. So again, right click on sheets and say, I would like a new sheet, please. And now we have that size D sheet. And to place views onto sheets is really pretty simple. It's, I guess, not really like AutoCAD, where I'm just going to take this level 1 floor plan from my view here. I'm going to drag it. So I click and hold, and then I'm going to release, and then I can click to place it. And if I want to move it around, I can use my arrow keys on my keyboard to kind of shuffle its placement. Something it does automatically that like AutoCAD doesn't do is it gave it a number, a name, and a scale automatically. If I was to change its name, so if I was to right click here and rename this to like floor plan, it would automatically then change it here, which is pretty great and pretty wonderful. And we'll see too with these symbols how some of those things are going to go in. So by default, it doesn't give the sheet a lot of information. For owner, in our title block, we're just going to click on that text holder and you'll just change that to your name. Again, if your name is too long to fit there on one line, feel free to do like your first initial and then your last name. For project name, we'll call this one Dogwood. And then for sheet name, I'm going to call this floor plan. And then for the sheet ID, we'll leave it at the A101 for it. So now if we want to make another sheet that's going to be for our foundation plan, we can right click on sheets here again and say we'd like to make a new sheet. And click OK. We still want to use the size D sheet. And you'll see that it kept all of my information here, except this time it gave it a title of unnamed. So I'm just going to call it Foundation Plan. And I'm going to give it a sheet ID of S101. And then I'm going to scroll up. I'll go to my foundation and I'm going to drag it, click to place it in as well. And if I decided I wanted this to be at a different scale, or if I brought it in and realized it wasn't at the right scale, I could just click on it once, and I can adjust its scale to say 3/8 of an inch. And it also updates in here, so all of that can just be pretty intuitive, but I do want to keep it at a 1/4 inch. All right, where we're going to see a lot of the cool stuff happen. And I'll rename this one. So I right clicked on it here, rename to Foundation. And I'll rename level 2 to Roof, just so it shows up in like our spot elevations a bit better. We won't actually put that one on a sheet at all. Let's make another sheet. So I'm going to right click on sheets in my project browser, new sheet, same size. This one I'm going to call exterior elevations. Might have helped if I spelled elevations correctly. And I'll call this one a 201. And what I'll do first is I'm going to drag and drop my east elevation. So again, I'm just finding it in my project browser, dragging it to hold it, and then I'm going to click to place it. And notice how this one came in really large. This crop region it kind of came with is huge. To change this title can sometimes be a little bit annoying. So if I click on it once, I can't just click on the title and move it. What you're going to do is click off of it. Then you can click and drag this title and move it underneath. To shorten this title line, though, this is also really goofy, is you've got to click on the view just once, and then you can click and drag that title to be shorter. So it's placed my east view on here. Now, one thing we can do to try to make it a little easier for things like our west view is if I double click on my west view in here, we can actually see that box or that region and just cut it down beforehand. So if I click on show crop region, this then will turn crop on and it'll just make that box inherently a little bit smaller. So now I'm going to hide it again. It seems silly, I know, but it's how the software works. I'm going to go into my sheets. So I double clicked on sheets. I'm going to double click on exterior elevations. Now when I go to drag my west view in, so I go to drag and drop, see how much smaller that box is inherently? Also, before I click to drop it, it gives me this little dashed line to let me know that my levels are lined up for my view. So if I click here, my west view and my east view are nice and lined up. I'm going to try to fit all 4 on one sheet. So I'm actually going to put my west view underneath here. So this is what I like to do to try to align the views up, is I'm going to drag that west view sort of on top of it, shuffle it over so that they look lined up, and then I'm going to use my arrow key to shuffle it down. To adjust that title, again, you have to click off of that view, and then you can click and drag that title so it's on the sheet. To adjust how long that line is, you click once on the view, and then you can drag that line in by that grip. It's so silly and goofy. I'm aware of it, but there's nothing I can do. I'm going to drag the north, or go into my north view, adjust my crop. So I'm just turning it on just so it's there and it exists. We can even bring it in tighter if we want. So I can really try to like keep that region in as close as I can. And then hide my crop region. Go to my south view. I can prep this one beforehand as well. Bringing it in as tight as I can. And then hiding it. And then I'll go back into my exterior elevation sheet, scroll up. I'm going to drag in my north view, which it looks like I'll be able to fit them all in. I might have to do a little bit of finagling with my arrow keys, but I think I can fit them all. So let's move my north one over a little bit. We can additionally adjust views and adjust things in our paper space by double clicking on the view. You'll see when I double clicked on this east view how everything else kind of got half toned. So if I wanted to move these in even further by dragging them, I can edit them here in the software or on the sheet, and then I can double click outside to exit it. Again, I'm just trying to keep those sort of lined up. Let me drag my title up a bit. I'm going to double click in my north view and pull these in more as well. Double click outside of it, and then to get the title bar smaller, I'm going to click once on the view and drag that in. And then I'll put my south view on here as well, so I'm going to drag and drop my south. It's letting me know it's lined up. And then let me just make some adjustments. So the first thing I'll do is adjust where this title is. Or actually, I'll adjust the view first. So I'm going to double click in this south view. I'm going to click on this section head and just drag it down. I am sort of just eyeballing it a little bit in some instances. It's just easier. And I'm going to drag these markers in as well. Double click outside of the view to deactivate it. I'm going to drag that title up, and it is letting me know it's lined up with this one. And it'll even let me know when it's lined up with the north one above it. And then I'll click once on the view to get that grip so I can pull it in. And so I was able to fit all four onto one single sheet. If you couldn't, you can always just put them on two different sheets. I'm also just going to rename all of them real quick. So if I just click on the view once, I can either rename it by right-clicking on it and then rename, because I just want them all to be lettered. Or I can also rename it in here. I could scroll down to its identity data and I could call it north there. I have in my own template, just it adjusted to automatically be that way. Let's make one more sheet for our sections. So I'm going to right click on sheets and say I'd like to make a new sheet. Same size. I'm going to call this one building sections. And I'm going to rename it to A301. And I'm going to put section 1, drag and drop it. And section 2, drag and drop it. I should be able, Gonna see how I can fit these on here best. I think maybe this way might be a good way to fit them on. I'll do a little adjusting. I'll bring this title up. I'll even just use my arrow key to kind of shuffle that title up. I'll shuffle this view down a bit. Now, one really cool thing that Revit has been doing while we've been placing views on sheets is it's been filling in these tags for us automatically. So originally when we were making everything, this just had dashes. Now it's saying that this section cutting through our building here is view 1 on sheet A301. And if I go back onto my floor plan sheet, which I can either click on up here or I can go into my sheets, all of my elevation markers are filled in and all of my section markers are filled in. So everything's getting filled in for us automatically. And if I decided to renumber this sheet, A201, if I right click on it and say I want to rename it and I want to call it A sheet 33333, whatever I want it to be, it's going to update in all of my markers. So everything is going to then automatically update for me, which is just really, really great that we don't have to track stuff like that anymore. But I do want it to be 201 for it. And so that's how we would get views and place them on sheets. Sometimes it is a little bit of finagling to crop everything and get everything to fit the way you want it to, but it is a little bit more intuitive than if we were working in AutoCAD for it. Now for your submission, you're going to want to make sure you save your work and you are just going to submit to me your Revit file, your RVT project file. You do not need to do any printing to PDF or exporting for this assignment. And I'll be able to just navigate to all of your views through your project browser here.